Good evening, everyone. So let's just get started with some introductions. I'm Siobhan Dorks. I'm the president of the Advertising Production Club of New York. We're an organization that seeks to support students who are looking to enter the world of media, creative, and advertising. We also work with many of the professionals who are already in the industry in various guises as well. We achieve these goals by providing education, a strong community pillar, and fundraising for both our scholarship fund as well as our internship programs. Like many organizations, we've had to move to a much more online programming model throughout 2020, but we've done all we can to continue to provide the valuable content and have the conversations that we believe our community wants to be having. As well as these webinars that you may have been to before, we also have monthly virtual meetups, which are a really great way to stay connected to peers, meet others in the community. So whether you're a student, a young professional, you know, or you know, coming to meet some of those individuals who've been a part of our industry and contributing for many years, this is a great way to do it. So please keep an eye out for those invites. They're always on our social media feeds as well. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for one soon. One of the goals we have as an organization is to make it as easy and as accessible as possible for students to benefit from the amazing expertise that exists within the industry that they're looking to move into. As industry experts, we want to offer our support as early in a student's journey as possible so that you guys can benefit from the wisdom and experience during the end of your studies and make that transition into the industry hopefully as enjoyable and positive as possible. So with that in mind, we felt today's topic was a pretty good one to be covering at this time of year. We all believe that the earlier that you can prepare for the transition from that kind of structured curriculum-based environment that you've probably been used to for the last few years in college to the more unstructured professional world, the more prepared you can be to navigate that and the entry into the job market and all the other fun and games that will come with it, the better. So that leads us quite nicely onto today's conversation. Obviously, it's not news to anyone that 2020 has been filled with crazy amounts of uncertainty and lots of change in the way we interact with each other, and especially in the working world. So remote working is not going anywhere. And the impacts of these last 8 or 9 months really will probably now shape the way we work forever. So today, with the help of these guys here, I really would like to explore some of the kind of changing factors for candidates who are, you know, currently looking or will be in the next kind of couple of months. And those kind of aspects of remote job searching, networking, onboarding, and also, you know, really look at the positive implications for essentially a generation who are extremely comfortable and familiar with all things digital. And so entering the job market post-graduation for that, you know, for you guys really is, you know, it maybe is a little more positive than you've thought about up till now. So before we get into some of those, you know, good questions that I really wanted to cover today, I really think it would be a good idea to start by kind of allowing each of our panelists to just tell them a little bit about themselves, where they work at the moment, and just a little bit about their roles. So maybe we could start with you, Rebecca.
Of course. So hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Feld. I work for Omnicon Health Group. And Omnicon Health Group is the largest pharmaceutical and healthcare advertising agency in the world. I've been here for, it'll be 5 years in March. And I focus on hiring specifically freelance talent. So I come from like an HR background in terms of like recruiting. I've always kind of had an interest in like the healthcare industry, and like I actually fell into like working into healthcare advertising, and I've enjoyed this industry so much. So, you know, it's great to see like there are industries out there that can couple like your love of a passion and, you know, like really pursue like different industries and finding, you know, what you're interested in, and, you know, going for like a design, you know, aspect of like what you're like, if you have a design background and you want to work in a specific industry, there's so much out there that you can explore and really get into. And I had no idea like what pharma advertising was before working here. And I'm so glad I did end up finding it. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. Hannah?
Yep, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm from London. I'm in the same place that Siobhan is. So a bit of a background on me. I'm a course manager at Sales Impact Academy. We are a subscription-based platform, and we've kind of focused around learning and development for startups and like early level companies, early stage companies. More of a background on myself. I graduated this year, so I do know what it's like to be in the position where you're starting to do your job search. I did a double major in international studies and urban studies. I actually studied in the States and then came back here to work. And I work fully remotely now as part of a remote team working with Siobhan as well. So I think I have a good experience of what it means to be a remote worker and also that transition from college into a role. So hopefully I can give some good insight today.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne. And Marco?
My name is Marco Bon. I started an agency with two partners. It's called Tomorrow Agency. It's called Tomorrow. The URL is tomorrowagency.com. We're looking for junior designers if you are junior designers. We focus on e-commerce, specifically on the Shopify Plus platform. There are many different e-com platforms like Salesforce and IBM WebSphere and Magento, and those were these big, scary, they're enterprise level platforms. And Shopify, if you've heard of it, is a smaller one, and it's making big moves. And so we started an agency to take our enterprise experience, because my partners and I, like myself, come from big enterprise e-com. Enterprise, technically, I didn't know what enterprise meant till like a year ago. It means making more than $100 million a year online, which is a lot. And so Shopify typically was for small little companies and direct to consumer brands, and now it's taking on a lot more share. So it's an exciting field to be in, both on Shopify, but e-commerce in general. And I've been in e-commerce since 1999, and cut my teeth as being just a graphic designer, and wanted to then become an art director. And then I wanted to become a creative director. And then I discovered user experience as a field, and just was completely fascinated by no longer making things pretty, which was like my number one goal in life, but into making things clever, using data, working with other teams. If you're familiar with UX, it very often is a cross-functional team or cross-functional discipline. And so my background is really one in which, from discovering UX, I then ended up asked to be the head of e-commerce for a couple of companies, and just snowballed from being, really somebody who liked graphic design to then now running an agency, which is due to the long period of time that I've been working in my field. But I think that, the moon is like totally achievable. And I think a lot of people's goal is to like run your own company. And I have stumbled forward over the last 20 years and managed to accomplish that.
Thank you. I love the fact that we just have started that already with like, anybody want a job?
I
open positions.
I did, yeah.
No, awesome. Thanks, guys. And thank you again for joining today. So maybe let's just get started with some thoughts around kind of 2020 in terms of your own professional lives. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in the way you work? So not just the obvious, like I'm working from home, but and I guess how have you observed, what have you kind of observed about yourself from those changes that you've had to make? So maybe like with that in mind, Hannah, I kind of wanted to start with you a little really here. So I know a little bit about your story, and I think it's, really kind of fascinating that you found yourself, in the US studying while completing your kind of final year, and then a pandemic hits, and you kind of have to cut that short and head back to England, right? And I'm sure those last few months of studying certainly didn't look like what you'd planned. And my guess would be probably neither did the job searching. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit and talk us through kind of how you adapted to look for your jobs with that kind of you know, quite jarring situation that you found yourself in. And perhaps maybe, you know, a little bit around that kind of how you found the job and the hiring process and, you know, maybe even some of the onboarding.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of started my job search last September. I was kind of an early bird, really wanted to get in there from the get-go. And then COVID kind of threw all of that to the wind. So I had a couple of job offers and they were pulled in about March time. So that made things super difficult. It's that kind of feeling that I'm sure a lot of you are feeling right now, where you're coming towards the end of your studies and you're thinking, I really want this to amount to something. I want to go into a field where I feel really confident and that I'm going to enjoy myself. And so, yeah, COVID just really threw all of that out of the water. In terms of my job search and kind of finishing my studies, it was just about being determined. And I think just applying yourself in a determined manner. Whilst I was back, I was studying in the mornings, like waking up at like 7, 8 in the morning, studying until 3, 4 p.m. and then going on the job hunt. For me, I had never met anyone who had got a job from LinkedIn in my life. And then I became one of them. So I found Sales Impact Academy on LinkedIn. I had a really interesting hiring process actually, and I really enjoyed it. I think that the more companies become remote based, the more we're going to see some changes in hiring process. But I had an initial interview, just a phone call, just to kind of screen what I was interested in, why I was interested in the role. And then I had 2 more interviews, a task to do as well. And then one final one where I can kind of had the discussion around salary. And that's another thing I actually wanted to talk about today as well, was not feeling like you had to owe someone because you were remote working. I think that's something that a lot of young people don't really consider, that just because you are working for a remote company, which is it is a massive sell, doesn't mean you also have to sell yourself short. And I think a lot of companies will also find that really valuable and telling of you in your character, that you're kind of willing to negotiate a salary, and it says a lot about you too. So that's just a bit of a big overview on how I started my role.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that. So did it, I mean, that they kind of did the onboarding kind of flow from there in a very similar fashion, like quite organized and, you know, and the fee and the remote element. I mean, I guess you had nothing to compare it to, right, in terms of previous jobs, but that would, you know, did you feel like, you know, the kind of, it was fairly easy to kind of get used to colleagues and processes and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I've had a couple of internships before this, so I have had that brief experience of working in an office. But in my honest experience, I think that when you are remote working, you're forced to communicate more in a way that maybe you don't always in an office. And something that I really enjoyed personally was when I had my internships before, if there were times where I really wanted to ask a question, I would sometimes maybe feel that I was annoying my colleagues who I was working with. But when you work remotely, you have things like Slack and different tools which you use to communicate, and people will reply to you when they have their time to. So I think that kind of makes it easier and makes you feel like you're not a burden on your colleagues. So I think remote onboarding is actually improving communication in some ways.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I agree. Like having all those different kind of channels for communications really gives a bit more kind of control around boundaries and things, doesn't it, for everybody?
Definitely.
And, you know, time management and all that kind of good stuff. So cool, awesome. So Rebecca,
I was gonna chime in.
yeah.
I mean, Hannah seems very disciplined, and I, as a creative, am like not disciplined. So I was a consultant for many years. Like I would consult, and then I'd go into a brand that I was consulting for, and then kind of pop back out and be a consultant, which is basically what a freelancer does, and can be pretty blissful, right? You like choose your own clients, and then the ones you fall in love with, you go work for, and then if something happens, you go. So that's, I mean, a gorgeous lifestyle. But now that, I mean, your question was like, what's changed in 2020? And obviously there's a lot more screen time, but then it means you do have to be more disciplined, because when I was a consultant, like I would clean my house, or I would make a long lunch, or I would do various things. And I think discipline is a key factor in the job search, and in executing when you're working for somebody, but at home. But I think that the benefits of working from home and I say this having, spent a career in offices, can be amazing, right? Like you're much more comfortable, like you're not, and you don't have the pressures of like wearing the right clothes and buying like expensive lunch food for like $15, which is ridiculous. And so it's like cheaper, and you can have a dog. I didn't have a dog for a long time, and now I can. So maybe those are not very serious, but like, I think, to Hannah's point, there's also a lot more focus, so that we have so much more screen time now. All of our meetings are done over the screen, like visually, like we have to see each other's faces because we're all alone. So why would we have like a Zoom call and not have the camera on? And so, I think that working directly one-on-one with some of my designers or project managers or little meetings, like we really relish the time that we're together and looking at each other's faces. And then Slack is such an efficient way to communicate that, to me, it's been a super comfortable year. And I think that, I hope that people have a similar response as Hannah, like that there's a nice structure to it. And between Slack and one-on-one videos, like it's pretty organized.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. And I mean, God, we could do a whole different webinar though, right? On the idea of, how to be disciplined around Zoom. I think, the days of hoovering your house for 3 hours and making long lunches have gone the opposite way, I think now, haven't they? It's I certainly know that I've broken all my own rules, and I'm now on the computer from 8 a.m. until midnight almost every day.
Yeah.
And including working out on it and speaking to friends on it. And you're just like, oh my God, so yeah, maybe that's another webinar around some boundaries around taking care of yourself. But anyway, no, I agree. And that is great insight, Marco. Rebecca, can you just kind of give us a little bit of kind of the picture really in terms of like what life is like in a big agency at the moment, or kind of through the last 8 or 9 months, sorry.
Yeah.
Because I think you've got that, that much larger scale perspective as well.
Of course. So Omnicon Health Group, we've been actually extremely lucky because we are on the healthcare side of it. So these last 8 months, they have been still difficult, but we've actually been pretty busy in terms of hiring. And we've actually, this past 2 months have been extremely busy in terms of hiring also freelance talent. And overall, like for a big agency, what they've done for us is they have every month we have like a monthly check-in with our CEO, kind of giving us updates in regards to, returning to the office, overall trends for like, what's projected, and just providing updates across like the board for all the employees. And, it's actually like, I think overall, like this time has been exciting to work in healthcare, just because there's such an extreme focus on it, because obviously we're living through a pandemic, and it's just, everyone has their eyes on the healthcare industry at the moment. So been, being a part of a larger agency as a whole, like we've been extremely busy. The consumer side has not been as busy throughout this time, but it doesn't mean to say like the healthcare side of it, it's been booming for us, and an exciting time to be a part of as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a fortuitous area, isn't it, for you guys? Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So I think just before we move any further, and I think Marco kind of touched on this a little bit, but can each of you just discuss like what open positions you have right now? Like not list them off and kind of tell them, but like I'm keen to kind of just get an idea on like, giving everybody here an idea of like the picture of the job landscape right now and the opportunities that are currently, really there. But Marco, did you want to start, just because I know that you had already mentioned that you're looking, so
We're looking, but there are so many applicants, and they're all coming from, most of them are coming from LinkedIn and also various Slack groups, I think. So I think that there are, and I don't know of them because I'm not in them, but there are lots of like groups and boards and communities online where people are talking about their industry, and LinkedIn is one that I'm familiar with, but certainly for everybody on this call, all their disciplines, there are like, Slack groups, et cetera. And so I think that people are finding us through that, because I and a couple of my colleagues posted to LinkedIn. And yeah, so our open positions are for Shopify front-end developers, which might mean you would have a couple of years doing that, but project managers as well, which would require a couple of years worth of doing that, but then also a junior designer, basically to kind of learn on the job and, you know, do what every designer does at the beginning of their career, which is, you know, support senior designers and then be given a couple of projects that they can run on their own. But yeah, we have a ton of interest. It seems to be like a really active market. And I mean, we're an e-commerce agency, so we're like basically designing websites. And I could go on about how great I think e-com is, but that's a different question.
We'll get there.
It's like growing, you know, just like pharma, like people are buying stuff from their phones and from their homes a lot more than ever. I think the statistic is that our industry has grown in 8 months as much as it had in the previous 10 years. So it's just, it's fun.
Awesome. And Hannah, what about you guys at Sales Impact Academy? Like, how much hiring is going on at the moment, and you know, what kind of roles, maybe even in that more entry level?
Yeah, we've actually grown so much since I started. So when I first joined Sales Impact Academy, we were a startup of maybe 10 to 12 people, and now we've just hired 2 more, which takes us, well, throughout these last 7 months, we're now at something crazy like 30, which is just insane when you think that's been 7 months since I joined. Most of the roles that I've seen come through have been a couple more course managers, which is more of a project management role, which is more what I do. I've also seen lots of SDRs being hired, which is another field that I'm sure also is kind of targeted to more entry level. Other roles, sorry?
What's an SDR?
Oh, sorry. I always speak in acronyms. That's my fault. Sales development representative. And then the other kind of roles that I've seen kind of being really hot and like thrown around are things around product marketing. So not just marketing, but marketing that is specific to the product you're selling, and kind of bridging the gap between the product team and the marketing team. So if you can kind of find that niche and get some experience around that, I'm sure that you'll be wanted by many different companies.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty crazy growth there, right?
Amazing.
The world of startups is a fun one. I love that here we've got like everything from like tech startup, and then even though Marco was a startup, I'm not even counting him anymore because I think Tomorrow's been going for over a year now, maybe even 2, nearly.
True, yeah.
And but you know, in an e-com space, and then obviously more of the kind of the giant agency piece here. So it's a really nice blend. So yeah, Rebecca, I mean, just an idea. I mean, I think you said the other day something crazy like 400 open positions. But like maybe a little bit just of just a quick idea on, you know, what that looks like and what kind of roles.
Yeah, of course. So across the board, we hire obviously for both full-time and heavily also on the freelance side. So for full-time, we'll see anything from like junior copywriter, junior art director, junior medical editors. And those are great positions to get your feet wet in terms of, you know, getting experience in like art direction or copywriting. On the freelance side, we actually recently hired like a junior associate project manager. And, you know, I think a lot of people aren't as familiar, at least when I graduated, I didn't know what freelance was. And it's a great way to kind of like get your feet wet in terms of like, you know, trying position, seeing if like it's a specific company that you like to work for. And it's basically allowing you to still gain experience. And maybe just not 100% fully committing to being full-time with the agency. So as a freelancer, you have a bit more flexibility, and you can you know, work on different projects and really network a bit more. So it's really like exciting way for like junior people and junior talent to get more industry knowledge. And we hire we do have 400 active freelancers across our network at any given time. And I think like it's not always seen as something that's desirable, because sometimes, you know, we've been told for so long that it's like full-time job, you know, you need the benefits, you need this. And I think it is like something that isn't always like people like junior junior candidates, well, at least from my experience talking to them, aren't as keen as trying freelance. But for the most part, like we do try and have like anyone who does start out in a junior role in a freelance capacity, like go full time. So there is always that, potential for that. And yeah, I mean, across the board, like anything that's really you like a department in an agency. So we do have a whole production company, Link Nine, which Pat Johnson from. So they hire like video editors, they hire producers. So there's so much that goes into the workings of an agency, and there's just so many different like disciplines and departments that you can really focus on.
Yeah, awesome. So I kind of wanted to just have a little conversation for a minute around like where this hiring is happening or where these candidates are. So Marco, I know a couple of us have noted LinkedIn a little bit, but maybe back to Rebecca again, just to start on this actually, like where are you looking for these candidates right now?
Great question. So we obviously always post on LinkedIn. It's always like probably, I think it's our third most common place that we hire people from. Surprisingly enough, actually employee referrals is number one. So it really shows that like networking, people that, like it's still our number one hiring source. But I would say like also for like, when you're searching for jobs, Indeed is also a good platform. Personally, like I've always had luck like going to the company website itself. So if you have a specific company that you're interested in and you're like, you've always kind of followed them, I would go to the company website itself because it actually directly goes to the platform, the candidate applicant tracking system platform that the company specifically uses. So sometimes your application will be noticed first rather than just applying through kind of like LinkedIn or Indeed specifically. So I definitely recommend that. And it's also a good way for you to like, further see more information about the company because you're on their website and you can get a better picture of like who they are, what they hire for, and read about like, their mission statement and everything.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that like, because obviously like going via the site is great if you know where to go, but if you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd never find the site. So it sounds like what you're saying is like, they're posted on LinkedIn as well. Like LinkedIn is a great place to be doing that searching, but maybe then go and do some further research on the company's website once you've come across it. To get the understanding of the company itself and if it's a good fit from all sorts of perspectives. And then at that point, instead of applying on the LinkedIn link, if you like, apply on the company website link,
yes.
But still use LinkedIn as your kind of your searching.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. That's
cool.
cool.
As a place to kind of brand yourself, right? Like have your resume there and have like an article you've written or a portfolio, a link to, like, it's a good hub. But I was going to say, Rebecca, you're totally right. Like if you like a brand, like go reach out to that brand. And I think we're all inundated with direct to consumer brands like Casper and those friggin' shoes, bird.
Oh, yeah. All birds.
I mean, they look really ugly when you wear them for too long. So I think that they're.
Say what you think.
Huh?
Say what you think.
But yeah, if there's any brands like that in the world that like inspire you, that you're jazzed about, like write to them. If I think working directly for a brand can be great. And if you're an agency person in your mind, like find out what the top 25 Shopify agencies or top 25 advertising agencies or production companies or photo studios, like you can find all those lists and then like email them all with. And yeah, I think as opposed to 20 years ago, like I think the ability to get yourself in through a website and be noticed, like Rebecca said, it like many of them go into some sort of like job system. Like I think that it's totally accessible. It's a pain in the butt, but you can choose your own destiny.
Yeah, no, I think LinkedIn is so powerful, right? Like if you really start to actually understand it, it's powerful for all those pieces, and maybe we'll get onto that in a bit, but that building a brand yourself, it's obviously the networking piece is already coming up, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then obviously that, you know, even the search, you know, the opportunity to find groups, communities, all those lists you're talking about. I mean, they really are at your fingertips. Like, you don't need to be a LinkedIn expert to do that. And I think like really getting to grips with LinkedIn and understanding that it isn't just a business social media. It's not business Facebook or Instagram, you know, spend some time about it, become an expert, understand, you know, its purpose, and it can be your magic wand. Truly, truly, truly. You know, Hannah, I love what you're saying earlier around spending 2 or 3 hours a day doing the job searching, and I'm sure getting familiar with LinkedIn was pretty key in that. Really. And my guess would, and as soon as you're in that job, it's only going to continue. So every single piece of, you know, of every hour or minute you spend on LinkedIn, it's never going to be wasted, because irrelevant of what job you get, and irrelevant, you know, you're always going to be job searching too, and building that network throughout your whole life. You know, my guess would be that LinkedIn is going to be the place. So one thing I did just want to ask, and it actually just was just sent in as a question actually. So other than LinkedIn, I guess this is 2 parts. Other than LinkedIn, are there any other platforms worth thinking about? And in touch with that, can we talk to Indeed a little bit? Is it used? Is it valuable? Is it helpful, or isn't it?
I would say we still overall like our postings specifically still go routed through to Indeed.
Okay.
So there are like at least for you know, like what we use right now, I would say it is still a popular site to go for job searching. I would also suggest like I know there's sites such as like, you know, Working Not Working, or which is a site for creatives that can post their portfolios and kind of say, you know, like, I'm looking for a job right now, I'm not looking, or you post a status of, you know, if you're available for work. And it's also a place where employers can post if they have a job that they're looking for creatives for.
Yeah.
So there are like, you know, those kind of like portfolio kind of creative sites as well. And there's also, trying to think, I mean, no, Monster is not used anymore at all. um, but I would say like also kind of, there's sites where you can post like Upwork and sort of like, you know, that those sort of sites as well, where people can go in and to see, you know, like if a company is looking for, you know, specifically and more like on the freelance side for like short-term projects, but it's not to say that that can't lead to, you know, something for their long time and also like a full-time role in the future.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, cool. I mean, Hannah, when you were looking, I don't know if you really ever did in the US. I'm conscious that possibly the current, you know, currently being in the UK, it might not be as relevant. But like, were there any sites other than anything that we've mentioned that you specifically came across when you were, you know, kind of considering and beginning to look early this year?
Yeah, I don't know if this is totally applicable, just because I think maybe a lot of the people on the call are in the States, but there definitely are some roles that are either totally remote or they also apply to the US. But one specifically for like more design media type roles, there's a site called mediabeans.io, and they post loads of different roles on there daily, which are really applicable. And even if it just kind of shows you the companies that you might like to work for. That's a really great site to use. I was also going to make a point about pivoting the way that you use LinkedIn, because I think something that I didn't realize before graduating was that you didn't just have to look on the jobs part of LinkedIn to find different roles. And I would really advise everyone to kind of make connections in the areas that they think they'd like to work in. Maybe connect with a couple of people at companies you'd really like to work in, connect with people in the sorts of roles you'd like to do, because often people will share jobs that are available before they go like fully live on LinkedIn, and you can get in there first. You can even direct message them and say, hey, I'm super interested in this role. So I think changing the way that you approach your LinkedIn search can also be really valuable. And then I was also just going to make a point around the way that you kind of design your CV. I think a lot of different media and design brands are looking for people that think out of the box. I know that we have a company here, it's like a sweet company, Siobhan, you might know it, it's called Candy Kittens. And I know a girl who got a job there from redesigning her CV, the way that the sweet packet looked. So just kind of thinking out of the box and making yourself stand out from the crowd. Even if it's you want to work for a finance company, think about the way that they might like someone who works for them to kind of approach their work and mirror it with that. So that's my kind of advice on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I got onto a lot of school, like art school alumni job posting boards. And so there's one system, I don't know what it's called, but a lot of the schools are connected to it. And SCAD is sending me portfolios, like resumes as well. And I'm surprised by how lame a lot of those resumes look. So I think having like a well-designed resume that doesn't have too many frills, like it shouldn't necessarily have your personal style. I mean, maybe that's how you want to represent yourself, and that's great. But like, I think having a resume that's easy to read and clear and somehow kind of more adult and like polished is important. And then when I mentioned LinkedIn being important, again, I see it as like a hub, because for creative people, like that doesn't look good on LinkedIn. It's just a place to put your links to your Behance or to your Dribble or to your Squarespace site. And so I would spend time making those environments look as good as possible. And again, not to diss SCAD at all, but the Squarespace sites that I'm seeing and I'm looking to hire people as junior designers could be more polished, even if it's like student work. Like, just take the time to make your website look kind of as slick as possible, and then I think you'll be noticed. But I do think, also, again, as I said before, reaching out to agencies and to brands directly is like totally accepted these days. And because we're all at home, like, I think that like people like myself we're reading all of our emails that are coming through from, the contact forms on our websites.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I think we talked a little bit, right, around, around this idea of it being a very employer, focused market right now, right? There's a lot of candidates out there. And so I think that idea of standing apart is, almost more important than maybe it's ever been, right? And maybe that kind of moves on to that, that concept of building a digital presence and a brand. And I mean, I think you've already touched on this a little bit, guys, but I mean, is there anything else really that's kind of worth providing some thoughts, tips, considerations really for people to make sure that they are rising to the top of that hiring manager's pile, I guess, so to speak, so, creating branded content, or, to your point, Marco, actually just spending some time making sure that the resume and the portfolio looks professional. And maybe just, I mean, I don't know, Rebecca, you probably look at a billion of these. What kind of, what makes it stand out in that 2 seconds maybe that you give them before you move to the next one? I mean, you must, goodness knows how many you're looking at a day.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And honestly, I looked at, a project manager isn't always considered as creative, obviously, as like an art director or copywriter, but I actually looked at someone's the other day and it had like really nice design. It had a good color scheme to it, and it was just tastefully done. And it made me look at that a little more extra than I did of just like, the basic format, the black and white. So I think, taking it to a still professional level, but adding a way that you are branding yourself to the employer to show them like, this is what I can offer you. Definitely showcasing your portfolio on your page. And I think also like, what it was said about like maybe catering it to specifically the like company that you're applying to. I think that was like a great example, Hannah, that you gave, because then it shows like this person's going above and beyond to like really look at our brand. They use the branding for their resume or their cover letter, for example, and, it showed that they did their research. They're going to stand ahead to me over like somebody who's just sending me a regular cover letter that's like black and white and like, dear sir and madam. It's, taking that extra step to go above and beyond, do a little more research in order to stand out. So I think it really does speak volumes. And yeah, like being like, you know, showcasing that your creative side is like what's gonna, you know, like that is what you want to show to them. And that little piece of like, you know, this is what I can do. And this is like who I am as a person, and like branding as your resume. I think it's important to, you know, show that and make that as like, you know, work on that to the best of your ability as you can and put your best foot forward.
Yeah. I think that that's probably quite a nice opportunity to kind of segue a little bit into this, you know, this concept of, you know, really what the creative space means to us all at the moment. And, you know, I think a lot of people listening today are probably saying, oh, I want to look for a job in the creative world. And I know we've spoken a lot about, you know, what that means, and what it can, you know, mean for different industries and for different roles, and even maybe for just the stages of what we are at our lives in terms of acknowledging that we can be creative. But, you know, how do we identify, you know, the areas? I mean, for me, I think it's almost about that idea of like identifying the areas that you really want to translate your passion into, right? And you know, what are those different types of creativity, if you like, in this sphere that we're looking at? Because we've got a lot of the traditional creative piece and probably a lot of maybe more slightly more commercial stroke business school type of audience here. Like, what is that you know, from your perspective, and maybe we can start with you, Marco, like that kind of executing creative as opposed to like data creative, or maybe much more strategic kind of individuals, like as the creative director on this panel, like how do you think about that, and what is any kind of guidance to, you know, to people entering this creative world that you have on that kind of subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's great to get into a job that has many different disciplines within it. So an agency is an interesting environment because you're kind of bumping up against other disciplines. So you got hired as a graphic designer, but there's a photo studio somehow related to that agency. And so you are bumping up against an art director who's a photo shoot art director and not it's my dog, graphic design. Like, so as a graphic designer, you're taking things from the photo studio and working them into, right? So then all of a sudden you're starting to understand like what it means to work in a photo studio, and maybe you pivot that way. So agency life, sorry, he's going to continue for a little bit. Agency life has a lot to do with like rubbing shoulders with, let's say, some other creative professions, but then marketers. And like a marketer very often has a strong opinion on what she or he needs, but not very creative. And you like tussle with them. That's been my experience. But in that, you find their creativity in like what markets they're trying to reach, what numbers they are looking to get, you know, what dollars they're willing to spend. And you might turn out to be a great marketer and a, you know, kind of average graphic designer. Similarly, you bump into analysts and like number wonks, and maybe you're just like great at math as well. I wasn't, but you know, maybe like, you know, you end up rubbing shoulders with people who are giving you all sorts of data on like how to design a page, because we're looking at users clicking on this button more than this button, and you should make it larger and make it red so more people see it. And then you get fascinated with Google Analytics. So I love working in companies where there's many different disciplines, and brands are like that as well. A brand has an agency within it, right? So if you're working at Ralph Lauren and working in the digital department, there's everything I just listed lives within the digital department, and you're just bound to bounce up against stuff that like fascinates you. So I say, don't be as concerned with like your end goal as a professional person. Jump in, find a place so that you can like, you know, rub up next to these other professions that might be like your route in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Rebecca, did you have anything you wanted to kind of add in that?
I think Marco has some great points. I think for specifically just for like healthcare side of it, obviously we hire creatives across the board. And I think just having like any sort of like, if you kind of work on your portfolio and you kind of cater it to, you know, maybe a specific industry that you think you have an interest in, I think that's also helpful. As like, you know, and you may not know about like, you know, the pharma industry as much knowledge about it, but if you just have a general interest in like healthcare overall, I think, working on kind of like your portfolio to cater to certain, projects that you can do on your own, or just like school projects, to create that, to showcase that you have an interest in that specific industry, it's going to help you open the door to get you into that industry as well. So, and it's totally fine if you don't know, an industry that you may have a passion for, but that's okay to like, this is, your time to explore that and kind of further see like, okay, like, a healthcare kind of ad typically will use like a lot more white space, or kind of, just looking into that and seeing kind of the style of a specific, um, a design that you like, and kind of catering your portfolio that way.
Yeah. Okay. I think this also kind of like brings up something that we had spoken about a little bit around this idea of like being maybe not so focused on the roles themselves, and actually being quite open to understanding and at least learning about, or having, or trying to come across the industries, because I think that's where you're going to begin to help yourself on that search, right? And whilst there are a ton of industries who've really suffered greatly in 2020, there are tons that haven't. And I think, Marco, Rebecca, well, and Hannah, you're all perfect examples, right, of pharma, e-com, and startup. Then tech startups are all going nuts. And so, but I think, how students, or, how kind of young people can, and even know, it's that I remember when I was little, and my mum would say, and I said I didn't know how to like spell a word, and my mum would say, go get a dictionary, and I'm like, well, how is a dictionary going to help me if I don't know how to spell the word? Like, this is the chicken and the egg thing, right? Like, if you don't know the industry, how do you know to go into the industry? Like, so Hannah, how did you come across where you came across? Like, I mean, what made you think startups?
For me, it was kind of, and I guess maybe some people on this call will feel the same, not knowing what you wanted to go into. And I think Marco made a really good point around just kind of getting your foot in the door, because startups provide so many different opportunities for trying different roles. Kind of in the same way, if you're at an agency, when you're in a startup, things kind of just crop up that need doing, and there might not be someone on the team whose designated role it is to do that thing, and your manager might just be like, Hannah, can you do this for me? And suddenly you have this incredible opportunity to do something which someone who might be 2-3 years into their first role would never have had the opportunity to do. So I think startups are a great way to kind of get your foot in the door, try something you've never done before, and even if it ends up that you end up doing something different to what you started doing, you will kind of end up where you're meant to be, if that makes sense. If you have a manager who kind of takes from your strengths and sees what you're really good at, I think that startups are a great first role to kind of see what it is that you actually really enjoy.
Yeah. I think that leads us on, that kind of is a nice, point around those more, those other areas to focus on as well, right? Like, you spent, and this is to that point around, like, you spent the last 4 years in a very structured learning environment. And actually what is now on offer is a very unstructured environment. And some jobs, some industries suit that more than others, startups being the most extreme probably, but also the most open. I think the majority of startups really don't tend to hire on skill. They really hire on character and fit, and those kind of things. So maybe, and I think, Rebecca, you had some interesting thoughts around this, like those kind of soft skills, and what, because I think they're things that, like, as young professionals, we've already got, right? And we don't necessarily have to write resumes or creative portfolios to demonstrate them, but how do we demonstrate them, and how do we demonstrate them in a resume or in a cover letter, or I don't even know, like, how do you start to pinpoint those early on in that kind of hiring process?
So I would say, like, it speaks volumes when, for people that may have gotten laid off during COVID, asking the question, what have you been doing? Because, obviously there has been, unfortunately, like a lot of layoffs. So asking the people, have you stayed busy while you've been out of work? Or, what have you done that's outside of like the typical kind of day to day, like showing that you're proactive and really like staying on top of doing like LinkedIn learnings, or even volunteering your time with different the different ways that you can, if you have an interest in writing, for example, like writing blogs or just writing sort of freelance pieces. There's just so many different ways that you can continue to keep your skill set sharp, and showing that like you're still, actively working on it, doing like whatever you can to stay as busy and on top of like the industry knowledge and, the latest digital trends as possible, is going to like set you aside and show that you're a proactive person, and show that you have like that passion for what you do. And you're not just, lackadaisically sitting at home and twiddling your thumbs. It's going to set you aside that like, okay, this person, I want to hire them because I know that, they, didn't have work for a set period of time, but at the same time, they were still, working on project management skills when maybe they are typically known as like an art director. So they're trying to like further their skill set and make themselves more marketable. I think that's extremely important, as shows that like your soft skills can speak volumes instead of just like what a paper resume says about you.
I'd like,
Yeah,
you
totally.
also
Marco, is there
mentioned,
anything that
Rebecca,
yeah, please jump in.
you mentioned that your number one way to find applicants was through word of mouth. So I would say that a lot of the people on this call, and that's the way I found my first job, was through a buddy who graduated a year before me, and I went to work for him. So I talk about soft skills. The people who know your soft skills best are your friends in your network, and your parents' friends who do a job that you like and you can ask a favor of them. That was actually my job before I worked for my buddy, was friends of my grandparents who had a graphic design studio, and I worked for them. So use that network. Older people do favors for their, other friends to hire some kid to do a job. That happens all the time. We love it. Like, that's a way to pay it forward, because that's what happened in our lives. So use that, family and friends network without any trepidation.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about networking, but I think that's a really good point. I mean, like, the networking element is going to be extremely helpful throughout your career. And I think it can be a tricky one to get into, but I think that's almost a perfect way to do it, right? Like, just get onto LinkedIn.
When you're a kid, it might not be looked at as networking, because it's not really a network. It's just like your friends and your family, right? But so it's just like asking for favors. But I was always shy to ask for favors, and I just think that you should get over that shyness. But you're also totally right, Siobhan, that throughout your career, the relationships you make, how you are as a person, how you respond to an email and don't let it slide, because we all have had emails that we didn't respond to. Just like, be a good person. And that the people you accumulate and the network you accumulate over the next 5, 10, 15 years are people who are going to give you other jobs, are going to bring clients to you, because it all will pinball. And so that's the networking that'll happen. And it's not really that hard. It's just being like a nice person and responsive and doing a good job, and it's all in front of you.
No, I agree. I kind of think about it more of a treasure hunt than a networking. Like, it's if maybe that takes some of the pressure off, right? But yeah, like, there's always, the worst thing you could do is like have a coffee with someone and just ask them tons of questions. Everybody loves talking about themselves. So if that's the last thing you've got, then just do that. But I think, within 5 or 10 minutes, you'll find yourself with something to do. And maybe the fact that, we are now all remote is even easier to get someone on the phone for 15 minutes, have a Zoom call with them, and much, much less pressure. And you can kind of wear your pajama bottoms still. So that's cool. Awesome. So there's a couple of questions that I want to get onto, but before that, I just wanted to kind of ask Hannah one other thing is, so I think, in your kind of role, and you've already referred a little bit to the kind of the nature of startups, and that you're asked to do all sorts of different things, and all that kind of stuff, and stuff that to your point, you might not in a more structured company get the opportunity to do for quite a long time. What are some of the biggest things that you've been asked to do, maybe, or get involved in, or some of those processes, and that you felt really kind of grateful from, if there are any, for kind of coming from a generation that is, my suspicion, a lot more comfortable with technology, and that kind of form of collaboration and kind of connection and working. Is there anything kind of specific in there that you've really felt the difference?
Yeah, for me, I got the opportunity to be a course manager for quite a big name here in the UK. I'm not sure if anyone on this call will know Sir Clive Woodward. Yeah, he's like an ex rugby coach, and he also was head of the Team GB Olympic team in 2012, I believe. So having that opportunity to kind of be like the front person and be on his course with him, do what Siobhan's doing right now and be his co-host was absolutely incredible. I also got to meet him because we recorded an ad for him at like a studio, which was also incredible, and getting that studio experience. And again, that's something I don't think that many other people who are 7 months into their role would have had the opportunity to do. Even at the time, I think I was 4 months into the role. And I think, as like you said, Siobhan, being like digital natives, there are things that people from our generation who have just grown up with technology, it feeling like almost like a third hand, if you will, you just pick up so easily when you're on calls or when you're figuring something out for someone. Things just come so naturally and so easy to you. So use that to your advantage, and show how adaptable you are, and that you're not afraid to kind of take on a new challenge, but that these things just kind of come natural to you.
Yeah, no, really good advice. Yeah, I mean, I think some Americans know who Clive Woodward is. So,
Okay.
Sir Clive Woodward.
Yeah.
Maybe not Marcus.
Oh, you just
maybe
say
not
sir. I'm like, oh, sir. Now I know.
Yeah.
Who you're talking about.
And he was the guy. He's behind the rugby winning the World Cup, England rugby winning the World Cup, and England's biggest medal win ever in their 2012 Olympics. So he's pretty up there in the world of like leadership in sports. That's a very cool story. I agree. So awesome. Well, look, let's just take a look at some of these questions. So Hannah, I think somebody just asked if you could put the website that you'd mentioned in earlier in the chat.
Sure.
Awesome if you could do that. Thanks.
Spicybeans.io. What was it?
Media beans.
We'll have everyone on all sorts of websites. Okay, so maybe I think a couple of questions here. So Rebecca, there was a question here from how quickly do you throw out a 2-page resume into the wastebasket? I mean, does that really exist? Is it, and is it about, I guess it's what we've already said, right? But is it the size or the look or the whatever, or how quick does that just go? No, yes.
No, a 2-page resume is not terrible. I've definitely, I think, if you can get it on 1 page, obviously that's always a little more, it's pleasing to the eye. It's like, you have everything in one place, 1 page, but 2-page resumes, I promise you, they are okay. I'm not going to throw it to the wastebasket. I'm still going to take a look at it. It just makes sure your most relevant and like experience is at the top, and that you're not getting too far off track of like experience that you are putting on your resume that may not be applicable to a job that you're going to be applying for. So, obviously you could have been a lifeguard maybe, and if you're applying for like an art direction role, I may not include that, as previous experience as an example.
So don't be scared to like eradicate some of the jobs that aren't relevant just because you don't have tons to put on there. Just make it shorter and put the ones that are on there. Okay, cool. Maybe just quickly, you could also talk to this is like, what about cover letters? Are they essential?
Oh, this one. I have looked at not as many cover letters as I should have in my time. I will be honest to say that resumes really do speak higher volumes than cover letters do. I think for a junior person though, cover letters I will take a look at. But to be extremely very honest, resumes more speak higher volumes than cover letters do. It is important to still include a cover letter. It's, a great way for me to double check that you did your research, that sometimes I'll see a cover letter that'll be like, people use the same template to apply for multiple jobs. So sometimes they won't change the job that they're applying for. So sometimes I'll see more mistakes on cover letters than it does actually help you to apply. So just when you do use a cover letter, make sure you're checking the grammar is correct. It does not have to be extensive. We really are going to focus much more heavily on your resume, and like, you know, the content of like who you are, rather than reading about kind of how good you can fluff up to say like why I want to work here, because your resume, your previous experience, that speaks to like who you are as a person and kind of like, you know, what you've done in the past. So that's speaking to like your true identity rather than kind of like a cover letter it does.
Sure. And Marco, did you have anything in terms of cover letters? There's a question here from Jennifer around if there's anything specific within one that would help. I mean, are you of the same opinion of Rebecca, or is there anything that you particularly love to see on something like that?
Well, we get an email with a resume. So let's pretend that an email is a cover letter, because I have never gotten a graphic designer who's written a cover letter on top of their like resume. So there have been emails that have jumped out because the enthusiasm a person can communicate through a well-written email can go miles. Sometimes it's a little too much. Sometimes it's just right. So an email to me, like, because again, there's like a form, it's like write an email and then like attach a PDF. I really enjoy reading those, and I like when they show the person's character. Like I think maybe 80% of what I'm hiring into for a junior is somebody who I can get along with, and who the team can get along with. So, and that's, you know, we didn't talk much about interviewing. We didn't talk at all about it, but that's what I'm just looking for, somebody who we can like work well with, right? I mean, so just like amiable, like will take tasks and like understand that like not every task is glorious, but like Hannah said, there was a number of like opportunities within those tasks, and all of a sudden she's sitting next to Sir Richard Raleigh. And so just like be cool and light on your feet, and if that's expressed through an email, great. But yeah, I've never gotten a cover letter around 2 pages. I've never seen it, but if a graphic designer or you know, logo or illustrator would put a second page that has examples of their work, that would not be the worst thing ever. Like if there's a second page of best of creative with like a big ass link to their website, that would not be
Bad thing.
a bad thing. Yeah.
Actually, maybe you can just speak to this a little bit. Something just popped in around how extensive a portfolio should be. So if experience is quite limited, you know, do you really want to see every kind of issue of a newsletter type thing that they've posted, or, you know, is
No, I only want to see the best stuff. So some project that they did for school that is lame, just because it's a project, shouldn't be there. They could go design a new soda can over the span of 4 days, and it would look, if it could look better than that project that was lame that they did for school, then design a new soda can and put it up there and say that it's like spec work. You know what I mean? Like
Great
fill
idea.
out your portfolio with beautiful work that you think represents you, even if it's just you playing around. Like what, you make a new Dove soap if you're into Dove and feminine products, and just have a portfolio of these things, you know, like make the thing look good is the key. Eliminate the kind of projects that you did love 4 years ago, but you know aren't really representative of who you are now.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Stinker on the page.
Yeah, no one's gonna check if it was real. And actually,
Yeah.
going into a creative world, trust me, you're gonna spend an awful lot of your life doing work that's never gonna be.
I don't know the right term, but you say that it's like an exercise that you did yourself, and like,
Spec work is perfect.
yeah, but like, I mean, spec work might mean that you did it on spec for them. So like, just say it was like a creative exercise. But one thing that I think is really good in creatives, which you didn't ask, but think about all channels. So if you're a packaging designer, also do like a Instagram post, and also design a homepage so that you show that you understand like the fact that your branding and your creative lives in different channels. That kind of stuff is missing from a lot of the portfolios. I think that professors in the colleges are not teaching it, but like, it's not just packaging design, it's how that packaging looks on a Instagram post. That is So, think about all channels whenever you're doing creative, and in your portfolio, express that you have some sort of understanding of different channels.
That's very, very good advice. I mean, listen, guys, I'm conscious that we're well over time, and I think a lot of people have stayed on, so I think that's that's awesome. And Marco, I think that's an amazing place to finish. To be honest, like if I can't imagine that every creative on this call can't take that piece of advice away and action it pretty much immediately. So thank you for that. I know there are some other questions that got dropped in that we haven't kind of covered, but hopefully everything that we've gone over today has been useful for everyone. I know all you guys are, as we've talked about, very active on LinkedIn, and I'm sure if anybody wants to get in touch, they can do. They can connect directly. Everybody's names are included, and we will make sure they're included in the post email. Along with the recording tomorrow. So I guess, guys, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. As always, so grateful that you guys can give your time, provide so much insight. I think we could go on for 3 hours every single one of these panels. This same thing happens. We get to an hour and a quarter and we're like, we're just getting into our flow. But that's life, right? And there'll always be more. So thank you again, guys. Really, really appreciate it. Hannah, really appreciate you staying up a little bit late. Hopefully can get to bed soon. Rebecca, Marco, I miss New York and Jersey. I hope to be back there soon. And it's just been really fun. So thank you so much, guys. Thanks everyone for kind of coming on and joining us in this chat this evening, and we'll talk to you all soon. So have a lovely December, holidays, whatever you're all doing. We'll
Thank you,
take
Siobhan.
it. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.